A lot of interesting games this weekend, but there's one that's standing out more than the rest.
Really?
Oh, you didn't know that?
I did not.
It's in your rundown. We're leading with Michigan State, Michigan.
That is a really big game. I'm really excited to watch that one, too.
113 meetings all time. This will be 114.
Huge. And they're both really good.
They're both really good this year, both in the top 10.
Intrigue.
But this rivalry, the last 15 years or so, has really ramped up the intensity. In case you've forgotten, let's go back to 2007. Michigan trailed 10 points halfway through the fourth, scored 2 touchdowns in 7 minutes, leading to Mike Hart's infamous comment.
I was just laughing. I thought it was funny. They got excited. It's good. Sometimes you get your little brother excited when you're playing basketball and stuff. Let him get the lead. And then you just come back and take it back.
Do you think of Michigan State as your little brother?
Yep.
This game is an important game. So they want to mock us all they want to mock us. I'm telling them it's not over. So they can print all that crap all they want all over their locker room. It's not over. It'll never be over here. It's just starting.
And the drama was just starting, too. In 2012, Michigan down 1, 5 seconds left. Brandon Gibbons, a game-winning field goal, despite the fact Michigan scored 0 touchdowns all game. Brady Hoke and the Wolverines win 12-10. In 2014, Michigan's Joe Bolden drove a stake into the ground at Spartans Stadium before the game. All that did was motivate the heck out of MSU, who rode Jeremy Langford's career-high 177 rushing yards to win the game by 24 points, largest win over Michigan since the 1960s. And that all led to the most famous play and call in the rivalry's history. From 2015, here's Sean McDonough.
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. It's picked up by Michigan State's Jalen Watts Jackson, and he scores on the last play of the game. Unbelievable.
MSU didn't lead the game till there was zeros on the clock, but they win 27-23. Now in 2018, MSU was 10 minutes late for their normal field walk. They asked Michigan to clear the field, but a few players didn't. So MSU just bowled right into them. Later, Devin Bush went to the Spartan logo and picked up the dirt on midfield. As for the game, Donovan Peoples-Jones had only 1 catch. It went for 79 yards and a score, and Michigan won in a battle of ranked teams yet again. This time, the home crowd in East Lansing got shushed by the Maize and Blue. The legendary Paul Bunyan Trophy went back to Ann Arbor, but it's not there currently. That's because the Spartans have possession of it thanks to last year's game, which, because of COVID, was in week 2. Wolverines were ranked 13th in the land, but Rocky Lombardi threw for more than 300 yards on them, giving the first win ever at Michigan State for Mel Tucker on the road against his main rival. The only other head coach to win their first game ever at MSU over Michigan was a guy named Nick Saban. And yes, you guessed it, the protection is already underway for this year. The game this weekend is in East Lansing, so Spartan students are already protecting their beloved home turf and their beloved Spartan statue. Here's more from this year's participants on the game.
It's a huge game. We're not going to downplay it and act like it's not a big game, because it is. It's a huge game, in-state rivalry. It's been going on for years and years and years. There's a ton of history behind the game. And, you got to prepare. You got to prepare like you've never prepared before.
Playing in the big games is, that's something that, us football players dream of doing, and winning those games and playing well in those games. And, especially if being our rival, beating them is as good as feelings we'll get this season. And I think, that's the reason why we play.
Before we break down the actual game, and as you said at the top, 2 really good teams in this matchup, this is what's so cool about it. This is why we love college sports, the intensity, the passion, the history. But with all the history, as we just showed, these last decade and a half, it has totally ramped up. It's one of my favorite rivalries in all of college sports right now.
I don't know if there's been another coach with a better glare than Mark D'Antonio, by the way. He is the all-glare all-star, and that's really what kicked this thing off in reaction to Mike Hart's comments. So the rivalry, because it's in-state and because you got fan bases who go at it throughout the entire year, it's going to be intense regardless. But when both of these teams have legitimate championship aspirations, I can't imagine a better atmosphere for it to take place than there in Spartan Stadium. I think it's one of the more underrated atmospheres in college football.
I mean, you got Michigan, the winningest program of all time. Michigan State, a team that in the last decade went to the playoff,
right,
which is something the rival hasn't done. And now they're both undefeated with sights on the playoff this year. It's going to be fun. So let's break it down a little bit. When Michigan has the ball and the Spartans are on defense, what storyline are you looking to follow the most?
I think Michigan State's run defense is much better than I think folks would give it credit for because they're big and physical up front. At the linebacker position, they run really well. Part of that just via transfers coming in and young players who step forward. So they're going to present a challenge for the Michigan Wolverines. Probably the best run defense Michigan has played, regardless of what folks think about the total defensive statistics for the Spartans. But I think beyond that, though, having the combination that they have access to, having Blake Corum and his style, very quick and shifty within the holes, and Hassan Haskins, who used to run like a linebacker playing running back, and now he runs like a true running back with the size and physicality that's associated with it. I just love the way that they attack downhill. They impose their will on the opponents, and overall, because they're able to do that, it sets up a passing attack that isn't amongst the best in the Big Ten, but it certainly is a passing attack that has the potential for big play that we've seen.
And the passing attack, the pressure's off because of these running backs. Right. I mean, Haskins and Corum are number 3 and number 7 in the Big Ten in terms of rushing yards per game. So Michigan's been running it so well offensively. When the ball's on the other side and the Spartans possess it, what are you looking at?
Well, one of the more efficient quarterbacks in the entire country throughout much of the season has been Peyton Thorne. And you think back to last year where we didn't know a lot about him yet. He was just sort of easing his way into the lineup. He wasn't even a part of the picture. Like you showed us a moment ago, it was Rocky Lombardi that was on the field against Michigan last year. But Peyton Thorne has played so well, not only throwing the football, but running the football. And I think against a ferocious front from the Wolverines, the mobility of Peyton Thorne will have to be a huge key because it's not like he's Adrian Martinez who come into the game thinking that he's going to run all over the place, but especially in key downs and distances, we've seen him throughout this season rip off big plays, rip off runs of double-digit in yardage over and over again, and the ability to extend the play while still looking back across his body to find throwing windows. He's very good at extending plays and has sort of the accuracy and the acumen to be able to make plays while he does it.
Right. He doesn't have rushing numbers that blow you away,
right,
but it's when he gets those big plays that matter. One final thought on this game. You know, there's been some talk this week about like, well, it matters much more to Michigan State than it does to Michigan. Like, first off, maybe, but second off, so what?
Right.
Like, it's not like Michigan's going to be okay with losing this game if they were. They still got to walk through that state every of the next 52 weeks knowing that their rivals in the state got the win if they
And, I mean, what a way for Mel Tucker to just kind of burst onto the scene and get his first win, his first big win as he did last season. Jim Harbaugh, he didn't have bragging rights yet against Mel Tucker. That is a huge additional element to this game.
For the Jimmy John's freaky fast play. This play was fast, though the game was long. Play took a little over 5 seconds. Game, 4 hours and 10 minutes. In the end, Illinois won, Penn State lost, and the Nittany Lions went from a top 10 team with playoff hopes to, well, trouble in the form of a losing streak. Which brings us to our Old Trafford beef jerky segment. What's your beef? And when you look at this Penn State squad losing their last 2 games, what's your beef with the way they've been playing?
I mean, I don't love the fact that they're at 20. I'd rather they're back in the top 5 somewhere. But I think part of the reason why is that when Sean Clifford initially left the lineup against Iowa, and then once he got to the point where he was playing what seemed to be perhaps banged up a little bit last week, not only did the offense struggle, the defense struggled as well. I do believe, though, that there's meat on the bone here, even if you don't have the full complement of Sean Clifford. I think there are ways that the offense can be supplemented because part of what made Sean Clifford special was not only his ability to throw from within the pocket, it was his ability to feed it around to a number of playmakers as he extended the play, utilizing his mobility. So if you can get the rock to Jahan Dotson in any way, in any fashion imaginable, if you got to throw it up while he's in triple coverage, if you got to hand it off to him and let him run around the edge, however that has to take place, that playmaker, especially against this secondary that he lit up last year, I think Jahan Dotson has to see the ball any way they can get it to him.
Right, because Clifford's now gone back-to-back games throwing for less than 200 yards. So is there something that they can do in this game that they didn't do in the Illinois game? And maybe you just gave us the answer. Maybe it's go to Dotson every other play.
I mean, I think that's a huge part of it, man, because they've got weaponry all over the place. And if you're a bit hampered at quarterback, and if you're not completely comfortable with either the abilities or the health of your backups, then make sure you are making life easy. And they haven't been able to manufacture a tailback run game, but I would say take a page out of the Jeff Brown playbook. Go ahead and get other people behind center then to do that. We see them utilize sort of a wildcat version of their rushing attack with a tight end in the backfield. Maybe do that with a receiver. Practice it with some of those running backs to make sure you're adding as many blockers to the point of attack as you can. See if you can outflank the defense in that manner. But find creative ways, not just something you use in spot duty here and there, but find creative ways to get ball carriers the ball.
And the other bad thing for the Nittany Lions is the defense they're facing is not the Ohio State defense from week 1 or 2.
Right.
They seem very different since that Oregon loss. Why are they so different?
Well, I think part of what's happened as Matt Barnes has taken things over is that we've seen an Ohio State defense that sees what they're looking at. They're able to see the total picture in a different way than they did early in the season against the Oregon Ducks. With all the man coverage that was happening on the back end, all it took was one defender to get out of position, and there's receivers and tight ends running scot-free out in space with no one around them. But as adjustments have gotten made, both versus the pass and against the run, you're not going to see this. We haven't seen this as frequently where a linebacker chases one motion man in one direction and completely voids the interior of the defense because there's been too many chunk plays when that happened. Now there's zone ice, even when there's 4 receivers in the pattern, a running back that comes out of the backfield as well. When you have defenders, whether linebackers and safeties, who have eyes on the quarterback the entire way, who leverage their routes and pattern match, that's a big adjustment that Matt Barnes has made since he's taken over the play calling duties. And I think as he's done that, now we've seen the players week by week get more and more comfortable with that. So now those athletes can react even much more quickly to what they're seeing and whoever has the football.
Well, it certainly worked. Each of their first 2 games, they gave up more than 30 points. In the 5 games since for Ohio State, their defense has yet to give up more than 20 points. Perhaps you hadn't noticed, but what looked like only 2 weeks ago to be an Iowa Hawkeye coronation in the West has turned into a barn burner. Hawkeyes are tied for the division lead with Minnesota, but only 1 game behind them sit both Purdue and Wisconsin. Could get more intriguing this weekend as Iowa plays Wisconsin. So the Hawkeyes were off last week. It's their first game since they lost the week before. What do you expect from them?
Well, I expect people to start listening to me. Because I told you this multiple weeks ago that this Iowa offense was going to be a problem, especially once they got into the West Division. The bye week should be a big difference, though. I do believe that just like we saw from Minnesota, like we saw from Northwestern, like we saw from Purdue, teams coming off of byes have had success. I believe finding ways to get Tyler Goodson the football, whether it's handing it to him in the backfield, whether it's lining him up in the slot and sending him on pass routes more frequently, that will spell keys to Iowa moving the ball with frequency because he's probably their best playmaker. They have both within the tackles and once you get them out in the open field. But overall, whatever creative ways they get Goodson the ball, I do believe that we'll see a Wisconsin defense that's become more and more effective with how they try and stymie opponents, because not only has it been for Wisconsin about stymieing the rushing attack and hitting blocks up front, it's also now about taking the football away. That's where Spencer Petras will have to have a big role in when they do trust him to pass it to make sure that he's doing it in a safe manner.
And the Badgers starting to click offensively. The last 3 games are having 293 yards rushing per contest. Now, a Big Ten Network doubleheader is coming your way on Saturday. Rutgers taking on Illinois or Indiana against Maryland. Then Minnesota battling Northwestern in the afternoon. Saturday on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Let me talk about that late one there, Minnesota and Northwestern. Do you think Minnesota's the most complete team we have in the West?
I don't think it. I know it.
Ooh.
I know it, man, because just look at how they execute. Now, what's been most consistent for Minnesota throughout the season has actually been their defense. Now, the rushing attack is great. They got college football's biggest offensive line, all those moving land messages out there knocking people out of the way. That's all gravy. They run the football as well as anyone can hope for with their running backs that have gone down and now having 5 different ball carriers throughout the season who've rushed for over 100 yards. But now that the receivers are healthy, Tanner Morgan looks more like Tanner Morgan. He's comfortable, he's confident, he's decisive, but that Gophers defense is really, to me, what separates them from so many folks, because a lot of teams in the West Division play defense, but then they don't necessarily have an offense that can set it up nearly as well as Minnesota's does. So running the rock, throwing the rock, playing defense, there is no one else in the division right now doing all those aspects of the game at the level that the Gophers are.
They win this game, they're bowl eligible before the month of November.
Saying something.
Also, we showed you Purdue is playing this weekend, so they get that huge win against Iowa. Then they lose their next game. So what should we expect from them?
You expect a team to respond, I believe, and the way Aiden O'Connell has stayed on the field is when he protects the football. When he's been taken out of the lineup, it's because he hasn't protected the football. And that's where some of the frustration has been at times for Jeff Brom as he's cycled back and forth between different quarterbacks. But I do believe overall for the Boilermakers, because they've got a defensive front that rushes the quarterback really well, and because they're facing an opponent who's coming off a bye week, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, they don't know exactly what they're going to see from Nebraska, but I do think because Nebraska's defense has proven itself to be dangerous, a multidimensional quarterback for Adrian Martinez, then you know whether it's George Karlaftis, Lawrence Johnson, a number of guys, Jalen Graham within that front seven, they're going to have to run all over the place. So it's a good thing Purdue rotates a lot of bodies through.
Yeah, and Purdue, they really need this win. If they still have an outside shot at that West Division. Right. Can't have any more hiccups right now.
It's got to happen. But Nebraska's going to get one of these, man. At least one of these. And maybe it's this week. Maybe it's the weeks to come.
We do keep saying that, though.
I know. And they continue to fight, man. They continue to play hard. I think it's going to happen.